We've learned a bit about JavaScript at this point, and we've explored the language. We've talked a little bit about some of the things that it can do. And in this video, we're going to walk through a demo of some of the live JavaScript code running. We're going to kind of get into each one of the steps, and we're going to see how this actually outputs and how it interacts with the user. So first, I'm going to go into my web dev folder, and I'm going to go into step 12. And from here, we should see we have a little README file. It's not going to really tell me a lot. It says this is some JavaScript examples. So it is descriptive and accurate, but it's not exactly the most informative file you'll find. So we're just going to go right into the project. And in the project, we'll see that we have, we have our requirements, we have our static files folder, we have our templates, and none of this really matters much for this particular demo because if we take a look at these, the Python files, they're pretty minimal. All we're really doing here is we're showing the HTML and we're rendering some templates to include that. But the interesting things are going to be in our static files folder here. And we could take a look at each one of these one by one, but we have a whole lot of different functions available. We have a whole lot of things that we can demonstrate. Now, if you look at the slides that were included, all of those slides are going to have links to JS Fiddle, which JS Fiddle, if you want to take a look at that, JS Fiddle is just a nice little place where you can come and you can create some JavaScript and you can run it very easily. So if you want to test something out, this is a pretty easy way to do it. You can just do something like this and hit run, and then you can see, that kind of is a quick way to do it. But this is going to walk through examples, and it's going to allow us to interact a little bit more with the browser. So our templates here are pretty basic, and they have different files to include different information. But if we look at our index.html, you can see this. It's just going to extend base.html. And here is where we're doing the work. So you can see we have a style sheet, but we also have this script element that we're going to use to include this particular script. And I've titled it script 001. Sometimes, we talked about this in the slides, but it's often good to be able to version these things somewhat manually and, directly like this. So, occasionally you're going to find that CDNs will cache your files, or your browser will cache the file, or something else will cache the file, and that could be that can lead to frustration. So you can always adjust this number and change that both in the script file itself as well as in the HTML file to make that force load that new file. So let's take a look at this. Let's go back to the terminal. We're going to run the dev app server here. And that's going to start up, and it's going to take just a moment. Here we go. Okay, we're doing the things. Yep, getting all that. Let's go ahead and open the web preview. Probably won't be ready just yet, but we can always refresh. Keep an eye on it, make sure that that's loading. So I think we're looking like it's going to be okay. So let's refresh the page. There we go. Okay, so we have all of these different places that we can take a look at this, and we're going to go back and forth between the editor tab and the examples tab here. And we can start off with functions. We'll take a look at some of these functions. So we have buttons now that are going to trigger functions, and let's take a look at what that looks like in the HTML. So we're going to click on functions, and you can see here we're using buttons, and now we're populating this on-click attribute of each button to call some particular JavaScript function. And you can see here first function. So let's take a look at the script for first function. So if we open up our script file, we're going to find first function here. I was going to search for it, but it's just right here at the top. And you can see functions don't have to return values. Now, when I click this button, you're going to see nothing actually happens. And that's because we want to load our JavaScript console. This is where we're actually outputting that. If you look at console.log, we're actually sending that out to the console. So usually you can go to View, Developer, and then find JavaScript console. I usually just use the keyboard shortcut on a Mac. It's Option Command J. You can toggle that on and off. And you've got an option up here. You can kind of set it to be at the bottom or at the right side or however you like. But you can see right here, functions don't have to return values. And because we have this in an external script file, it'll tell us exactly where that came from, which is really nice when you're trying to debug things. So that's the first function. Our second function here, functions can return values. And here, if we click this second function, it returned 1. There we go. So that's nice. That's nice and easy. And the reason why we got that pop-up is because here we're using this alert function. So alert is a function that will work in your browser to just display a dialog. That's all it does. It displays a modal dialog that will show up, and until someone clicks OK, they can't do anything else. So that you can see this alert. It's not part of the function itself. If we take a look at the function, this isn't actually doing anything except for writing out to the console. But if we take a look at the alert here. That's why we get that particular alert. So that's all right. So let's take a look at third function. And third function has parameters and it returns 9 here. And if we look at our code, that's going to be, because third function here, we're calling it 234. And if we look at the function itself, basically this is just going to return the sum of those numbers. So nothing too crazy there, but you can kind of see how we can use this in conjunction with alerts. Now, fourth function should output some information here and then tell us how many parameters in our arguments.length. So if we click fourth function, there we go. Fourth function returns 0, and if we call fourth function with 2 parameters, it returns 2. And if we look at the code for this, let's go back to the HTML file, you can see fourth function, even though we haven't identified it as taking any parameters, here we see fourth function, and here we have the definition of fourth function. In JavaScript, we can really supply as many parameters as we like, regardless of what's actually in the function, what's defined in the function. So you can see here, 7, 9, if we keep going and going and going, we can use this built-in arguments array, and that will tell us all of the different parameters. So we actually don't need to put any parameters in any function ever in JavaScript. It's probably not the most descriptive or maintainable or understandable way to write your code, but it is possible and you can do it. So that's an option that you have. So you can, this will show you a little bit about how to create functions and how to embed those in different interactions on your page. So that covers this little functions example, but we've got a lot of these to get through. In fact, probably doesn't even make sense to do all of these in a single video, so we'll probably break it up a little bit. But we can take a look at operators. Operators is a little less interesting. Operators is really just going to call the operators function, and if we look at operators, here we have, we're just going to output some values. So we'll click that button and we'll see those values output. And that's not exactly the most exciting. If you're this far into the course, you probably know how arithmetic operators work. So nothing terribly shocking or surprising there. That one's pretty easy. So if we go to Boolean operators, it's going to be a similar story there. If we look at the Boolean operators, we're going to call the Boolean operators function. We'll find where that's defined, and there's we're going to output some different values. You should see false if we output 3 is greater than 5. Well, it's not, so that should be false. And if we run this, you can kind of see how this maps: false, false, true, false, 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 true, false, 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 true. So we can see false, false, true. Yeah, that lines up. So I think you can kind of step through each one of these, and you can probably easily convince yourself how this works. Now, we talked a little bit about the triple equal sign and the exclamation point double equal sign for checking type, and you can see these are strings versus numbers, and JavaScript will tell you like, you know what, 3, the number is the same as 3, the string, unless we use that the exclamation point double equal sign or the triple equal sign. So this will, this is a little bit of weirdness in JavaScript because it does tries to make your job really easy, but I think that we can see after 27 years of JavaScript that actually probably made the job a little bit harder. So this will cover our operators, and we have some string examples. And again, we look at our strings page, and here we have a strings function we call, and if we go into our script, we see that right here, and this will just show us how we can interact with strings. Now, if you're familiar with Java, substring is pretty much the same method in JavaScript as it is in Java. And if you're not familiar with Java, but you've followed our Python, substring kind of works exactly like those slices in Python. So, we don't do negative values. Negative values don't work in JavaScript the same way they do in Python, but otherwise for positive values, this should work exactly as you might expect. So if we go back to our page and we run our string example, you can see, where we said this is going to do nothing, basically does nothing, outputs nothing. But the rest of these should be pretty straightforward, other than the negative examples. If we see, this is our character at 12, so the 13th character of the alphabet is M, and then we can see this one is basically 0. So substring of 0 to the end is going to be A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. So it's going to be the whole string that we started with. All right. Again, nothing too crazy or controversial there. If we go to our variables, we can see some variables. Let's take a look at that example, and you can see variables here. So we are going to, again, look at our script, and we are going to see, we're going to create some variables, and here we have var to use those variables. And var is not terribly common anymore. You'll see this in older JavaScript, but we typically use let now. And if we do uncomment that, we will actually get the we will get the prompt or the error that says that we can take a look at that. Let's go ahead and try it. So we're gonna run this once, and we will see how this operates. So 4 cats, and you can see that's the only thing we're logging here. But if we delete this and save it, I'm not sure it will pull it automatically, but let's go ahead and refresh. There you go. So we did get the error. So num has already been declared at, and that's because we use let. And if we use var here for each of these, let me change that one, var num, and we refresh, now everything's fine. So you can kind of see that difference. You can see how here, when we use let, that's going to check to see if that variable is already defined. And if we use var, it's going to not check. So we typically want to use let pretty much all the time in 2022. So variables, then we have a types test. So we'll take a look at that directly in the JavaScript, and you can see we're going to output the different types. So if we click this one, you'll see Boolean, number, string, object. JavaScript doesn't distinguish between integer types and number types when we use type of. They're both numbers. So there we go. And then null is going to be an object instead of a null type. In Python you have a none type. In JavaScript it's just an object. Okay, so let's get into the if statements, and then probably we'll take a break and come back to this in another video. So let's see here on if statements. We've got a function here that will evaluate some if statements. It's pretty straightforward logic. We're going to get a number from the user, and prompt works like alert. It's going to show one of those sort of system, the OS level dialogues popping up, and we'll enter a number. And if we enter something bigger than 1,000, it's going to output a message that says it's a really big number. And if we enter something bigger than 10,000, we'll see that's a really, really big number. And then if we do another number, it's going to tell us if it's negative, positive, or 0. So we click this button, and let's say we enter 3. Well, nothing happened there because it wasn't bigger than 1,000 or bigger than 10,000. And if we enter negative 1,000 here, we'll see negative 1,000 is negative. Well, that makes sense. Not exactly a groundbreaking statement. So let's enter a really big number here. And there we go. There we get it's a big number and a really big number. And if we enter, say, 6 here, you can kind of see how that's going to work. So this is sort of part 1 of our JavaScript demos. We're going to next get into our while loops, our for loops and arrays. Then we'll look at maps and objects. We'll talk about dates, and then we'll show some of the things that you can do with JavaScript using some randomness and some of the events that you might be able to use in the language. For now, thanks for watching, and hopefully the next video will help you kind of get through your head around some of these JavaScript concepts.